Given the insanity that we are seeing in the general public these days about the willingness to throw away their rights, whether it be the right to bear arms, the right of free speech, the right to assembly, or the freedom to due process, it makes one wonder what the hell is going on.
How did people get like this?
How are people seemingly arguing against their self-interest and feeling no compunction about it?
I'm going to take you on a tour of what is really happening behind the curtains in the world, all of which are being portrayed as necessary actions for the greater good of humanity. In 2013, former President Barack Obama was announcing his administration's brain research through advancing innovative neurotechnologies. The study, describing a way to manipulate a lab animal's brain circuitry accurately enough to turn behaviors both on and off. The point of the remote control mouse is not to create an army of robo-rodents, but to perfect a technique that will control the behavior by activating and deactivating neurons. The technique used to control neurons is called DREADS, designer receptors exclusively activated by designer drugs. Because the receptor does not respond to other molecules, including natural ones in the brain, the only way to activate the neurons is via the human-made ones. DREADS allow scientists to manipulate neurons without implanting anything in the brain. Look at this. Current optogenetic experiments rely on extracting opsins, light-sensitive proteins, from plants which can be introduced to mammals by methods including injection and infection via adenovirus. What they do is they genetically engineer a receptor that can get into a person through a viral vector, and what that means is through an injection of the vaccine or through the contraction of an adenovirus which has been modified. You might think, oh well, I just won't get injected, and I won't go anywhere where I can get this adenovirus. Adenovirus, there's 52 of them, and they range from the common cold, fever, sore throat, pink eye. They're prevalent. So that's creepy, because if you look at what it says, DREADS allows scientists to manipulate neurons without implanting anything in the brain. It indeed makes one wonder, given what we see today in the general public. You do need to take the designer drug, though, to make this effective. Once delivered into an organism, opsins can be expressed in eye, brain, or skin cells, allowing their light sensitivity to be remotely activated or silenced with timed pulses of light in different color wavelengths across the light spectrum that can target multiple bodily systems and cause a variety of biological effects. If targeted precisely enough with the appropriate light, it's thought that optogenetics could be used by manipulating neural circuits involved with pain, fear, reward, wakefulness, and social behaviors.
There's this enormous mystery waiting to be unlocked. And the BRAIN Initiative will change that by giving scientists the tools they need to get a dynamic picture of the brain in action and better understand how we think and how we learn and how we remember. And that's part of what this BRAIN Initiative is about.
If scientists can turn on or off specific targeted groups of neurons at will, they place themselves in between the natural human experience and basically their keyboard. They place themselves between you and your natural human reactions to things. So, optogenetics looks like the way to go. But how do you get people to put wires in their heads? Well, you can't. But it turns out now you don't have to. Here we have the new development in optogenetics. Luminopsins, luminescent opsins, or LMOs, were developed to achieve combined chemo and optogenetic manipulation. Luminopsins allow manipulation of neuronal activity over a range of spatial and temporal scale in the same experimental animal. What they are saying here is not only can they turn on specific reactions, but they can also turn off those same reactions. A problem they were having with the other methods is they could only do one. They could either stimulate the receptor or suppress the receptor. With the combined chemo-optogenetic manipulation, they can do both. They're using luminopsins, so they don't need the wiring anymore. Basically, science can use these luminopsins to interfere with a person's free will. The other function of optogenetics is just a simple observation. They might want to know how you feel about seeing a particular image, how that image changes the next thing you do. Basically, the scientists can understand what exactly is going on in our bodies and our minds, but to do that, it can't be invasive. Well, what have you noticed proliferating on the market for the last 8 years? Microsoft Band. It'll record all the stuff going on in your body. Same with Google Fit or Apple Watch. This Muse head-brain sensing headband is even scarier. There's also 23andMe, which collects your genetic data. Imagine if they had a combination of all these things. All of this is attached to your smartphone. So it's not so much the device, it's the smartphone monitoring that's the dangerous part. Because who's getting that data? And what are they doing with it? Look at what it says here. This is from 2016. Towards a psychophysics of interoceptive processes, the measurement of heartbeat detection. Over the past 50 years, research on interoception has grown exponentially from 17 citations of Interocept in 1965 to 8,440 in 2015, Web of Science. The early Russian work was summarized in Razran's landmark article on the subject and demonstrated, inter alia, that interception participated fully in the intersensory processes of Pavlovian conditioning. They want to know all of our interoceptive data because it plays directly into Pavlovian conditioning. You can change anybody's behavior if you know how to manipulate those feelings inside them when they are experiencing something. You do that over and over and over, and you actually change their whole physiological responses to it. Have you ever wondered if we are going towards that future? A world that is entirely sending feedback regularly to some processor somewhere? Is there a prison around us of electronic biofeedback and manipulation? Let's say there will be a flu virus, all the common adenoviruses, and they had this modified dread receptor in there. We would never know, and it would be in there, in our body, just waiting to be activated by the designer drug or by light activation. Maybe it sounds paranoid, or maybe not. You've been served with the opportunity to decide what to believe.
The secrecy that surrounds this issue is so extraordinary that most presidents are not briefed on it, and if they're briefed in a way that is perfunctory and very, very limited and designed to control their actions. It's not the 1%, it's the 0.0000001% who would not benefit from this because they are the ones sitting atop the petrodollar system, the macroeconomic order. For the most part, presidents since Eisenhower have not had appropriate access control. Now, what I mean access control? This means not only access to the program, but control over them. And people need to make, at the very beginning, a very clear understanding between knowing and being able to do anything about it. So every single president has been interested in this. Famously, Jimmy Carter, as he was president-elect, asked the outgoing CIA director, George Bush Sr., to brief him on this issue, and President-elect Carter was told by then outgoing CIA Director Bush that he would not tell him about this issue, and he didn't say he didn't have information. He said, "I will not share that with you," and directed him to get it from the Congressional Research Service, believe it or not, to saying that to the incoming President of the United States. This is well documented in Disclosure Project witness testimony from people who were privy to what happened.
One of the discoveries that emerged out of modern quantum theory is that so-called empty space isn't really empty at all. It's actually full of energy. So instead of being like kind of a quiet, empty lake, it's more like the froth at the base of a waterfall or something. And this energy is basically electromagnetic in nature, and the energy density is quite high. There's enough energy in the volume of a coffee cup to, say, evaporate all the world's oceans if you could get it all of it. there's enough energy in the volume of a coffee cup to, say, evaporate all the world's oceans.
We have the giant industrial, or really economic cartels in energy. And it's not one cartel, so there are many, many groups in energy, and each of those has become very powerful in its own area, and each one does not wish to see simple little electrical taps pulling out enormous energy from the vacuum. They would much rather see you burning a lot more oil and so forth.
The secret behind these UFO propulsion systems and energy systems would give us an entirely new planet, beautiful. But there are stakeholders who are very, very powerful who aren't happy about that. Now, many people have asked me, given the folks I've met with over the years, why doesn't someone do that? Here's a mistake many people have made. They come up with one of these systems, maybe it's a prototype that's only putting out 100 watts of, quote, free energy that's coming from the vacuum, 10 watts going in and 100 watts coming out. And they get approached by someone who says, oh, well, work with me and we're a VC group and here's $50 million for a startup. Guess what? Those folks are either shilling, they're fronting for the intelligence community, or they're sincere, but then someone comes in later with $5 billion and buys them out. I met with such a man not long ago at my home in Virginia, out at our farm, and he says, oh yeah, well, you know, $50 million wouldn't be a problem, but I would want to have control over the corporation and the technology. I said, I don't think that's really a good idea. Have you ever gone mano a mano with the national security state? He says, no, but I've done lots of, apps and, stuff. And, he thought this was like coming out with a new iPhone app. And I said, well, the problem with that is, let me just ask you a question. If you put $50 million into that research and development program and came out with a prototype of something that would run people's homes, take them off the grid, self-sufficiency, lift the third world out of poverty in 3-4 years, 5 years at the most. But someone offered you $5 billion for your $50 million funding. What would you do? He says, I'm a businessman. I would sell. I said, no, you're a money whore. And you have just sold out the future of the world to another front organization that's going to bury it.